Unless you've been living under a rock recently, you'll know that Nintendo just divulged a whole bunch of new information about their latest console, which is the Nintendo Switch 2, and I kinda just wanted to make a video about this whole thing, really like my thoughts again, because I do own a couple Nintendo consoles. I own a Wii, I own a Wii U, and I own a Switch. And I'm not entirely sure if I'm gonna own a Switch 2. Which really my first thought when they first revealed the name of this console, just Switch 2. I think they definitely could have chose a miles better name. I just like to throw that out there before we get into the meat of this video. But come on, that's something I could come up with while making one of these videos. But anyways, I think it would be better if it was called at least something like the Nintendo Switch 2.0. I think that just adds a lot more than just Nintendo Switch and then slap a 2 right at the end of it. Just like, boom. Interesting name choice there. I know Nintendo has done this in the past with the Wii and the Wii U, but I just feel like this is even less creative with the name because it's literally just the number 2. Come on. But anyways, I've literally been talking about this for a full 30 seconds now, I think. I don't know. It's been a little long here, and I kind of would like to get into the good stuff that probably most people have clicked on this video for. Anyway, so pretty much the Nintendo Switch 2 is very similar to the Nintendo Switch, or it appears very similar. Pretty much, instead of the Joy-Cons sliding on, the main gimmick of this console is that the Joy-Cons are now magnetic, and they magnetize to either side of the console. They're also slightly bigger. So basically it just looks like a beefed up version of the Switch. And technology-wise it does supposedly have the processing power of a PS4, which I think is extremely good. But at the same time, it could definitely be better, especially with, something like the PS5 releasing, which I know has a ton of processing power. Just for, that whole competition. I know that the Switch right now isn't too hot in terms of power, but there are definitely some great games to play on there, which is why it isn't completely dead. But I really just feel like these, specs right now, they're just gonna be good for the first year or so, and then everybody's just gonna move on to greater things because technology obviously improves as time moves forward and everything. I really just don't think it's gonna compete well long term. But unlike the normal Switch, this thing is capable of 4K video output, which basically means, in simple terms, that the image is super high quality if your TV or your monitor or whatever supports it, and the game too. Additionally, it can also display 120 frames per second, assuming you're not in 4K. But I think it would be amazing if it could do 120 frames a second in 4K. I think that would really just be the cherry on top and everything, but I guess I can kinda understand. In 4K, the maximum frame rate is 60, which I don't really think there's going to be a whole lot of people who are super upset about that. But this is another thing that I really just feel would drown out over time with competition rising and everything. Because obviously 4K gaming is already a thing, and I imagine there might be at some point within the lifespan of this console that 8K gaming or something like a higher resolution. I know that seems crazy right now, but I feel like that could become more mainstream, and then this would just be drowned out over time, really. But overall, these specs are pretty impressive right now, given just how low the specs on the Switch are right now. But I will say one thing, and that is that the fact that the Switch can run a game like Mario Kart right now with such amazing graphics, I absolutely love this game and how it looks. It looks fabulous, and the fact that it can run in such a smooth 60 frames per second is mind-boggling to me, given the size of this console and how it can literally just be right in your hand. So I think they're going to deliver, I guess. Nintendo is definitely capable of taking the hardware that they make and making the best games possible with that. Possible in terms of looks. It feels like you're running shaders in Minecraft, and I'm pretty sure for those of you who don't play Minecraft, shaders, they're pretty famous for only being playable on the best of the best graphics cards. I've seen a few videos of people trying to max out their expensive graphics card by using the most over-the-top realistic shaders ever, but I'm going a little bit off topic here. The main point is that I think the Switch 2 is going to deliver even harder with the graphics than the current Switch is. And I think that'll be great. I really can't wait to see what something like Splatoon 4 is going to look like on here. I think it's going to look incredible. One of the launch releases right now that's being shown off is Mario Kart World, which is going to be the new Mario Kart game. And pretty much a big gimmick of this game is how all the tracks are connected in one big open world. Instead of having to go through menus to select your track, you can literally drive off the first track and drive over to the next track. And that's amazing, because having all of that loaded in and having that able to like boot up instantly, just load right in, is going to require some processing power without a doubt. And I would sincerely hope that this game delivers as hard as it is going right now. So far it looks amazing, and it definitely utilizes a lot of the capabilities exclusive to this new console. If I had to guess, this is probably going to be one of the games that supports that 4K output I was talking about earlier. Can you imagine just how good this is going to look in 4K? Like, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe already looks amazing in 1080p, but 4K resolution on this would be amazing. Hopefully 120 FPS isn't mandatory though, because I imagine there's going to be a whole bunch of people with 4K displays that might be slightly affected by the 60 FPS. I know that sounds absolutely boggling, given how 60 FPS has been the norm for me, basically forever, throughout my whole life. But when you utilize something so powerful and you make that like the norm, whatever is inferior tends to stick out like a sore thumb, if you really get what I'm saying there. Another thing I'd like to talk about that they also teased are the Nintendo Switch 2 editions of the two Zelda games that I have played for a combined total of over 400 hours, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. I'm not really sure if I like these changes. I'm just gonna really explain why. Pretty much, the whole thing is marketed that's the same game that was on the original console, the Switch, but better. And by that, they mean enhanced graphics, frame rate, and that's not really something I'm too bothered about, besides the graphics not really differentiating very much, at least not that I can see. Maybe I'm blind or something, I don't know, between the two versions. But they've also added things to the game, and this whole element that they've added are known as Zelda notes. And they mark it up as if it's this new feature that's on the console itself, which is not true. Most of it exists on your phone, actually. And in a nutshell, what it does is your phone and console communicate with each other, and it basically adds things to the game, such as additional voice lines from Zelda when you go to certain places. I haven't done very much research in terms of this. I don't ever really do much research. This is just me really talking about my thoughts, really. But it just adds that to the game, as well as a whole bunch of statistical elements, too. Such as how many enemies you've killed, what kind of enemies you killed. Basically, a statistics screen from Minecraft, but it's in Zelda. And I think that's a pretty interesting decision right there. But the Zelda notes, I just don't feel like they belong in these games. I just feel like the games should be enhanced the way they are. And then that's that. That's literally the end. Like, there's no changes made to these games, because I've played through both of these games, and it just doesn't feel right just to have them changed like this. I'm not used to Nintendo games updating. Like, this isn't like Minecraft where it updates. Like, this is just a change they've made purely to drive attention to these two versions right here. And don't get me wrong, I do think that there will be a great crowd of people that will enjoy these things. I might even enjoy these things too. But my first impression is just kinda, I guess. Because these just feel plunked right into the game, with no changes made to the game itself. It just feels like a modified version of the game. And it really shouldn't feel that way, because with these games, everything should feel like it belongs there. That's one thing I noticed a ton while playing through these two. Is that there's nothing that just feels unnatural about these games. Everything feels like it's in its proper place and that it belongs there. And also, I just think it's going to be a little bit annoying having to use your phone and the console at the same time. I don't think, typically when I sit down to play these games, and I imagine many other people do this as well, I'm just here purely to just relax. I'm not here to just set up 1,000 things on my phone and just play it that way. I think these features would feel a lot more belonging, I guess, in the game if they were actually part of the game. like in the game, like, in the console itself. It would make a lot more sense that way. And then that really makes me think about how the other games are going to feel too, like the original versions, because I know Tears of the Kingdom, that's still a pretty recent game. So there'll be this like sense, I feel, that Tears of the Kingdom, and by that I mean the original version that's on Switch right now that I have, is just gonna feel like a scrapped version of the new version of this game. Breath of the Wild, not so much. I feel like Breath of the Wild is always going to be like a staple, and people probably won't pay as much attention to the new version of Breath of the Wild as they do with Tears of the Kingdom. But who knows, I could be wrong. I imagine there's also probably going to be a crowd of people that will be extremely attracted to this who haven't played Breath of the Wild in a long time. And it's actually baffling to think that Breath of the Wild is as old as it is, given how great the game looks. Especially in terms of render distance, because that was absolutely crazy that something like that could load on such a small piece of hardware. It was crazy to me. It's a real example of proper optimization in a game. But either way, these were some very interesting changes made to these two titles. I really can't go into the future and tell you the outcome of this, but I really think I'm just going to stick to the original versions, at least for a while, because that's where all my stuff is at, that's what I know. Maybe I'll start using these when I'm bored one day, but it's not going to be something like I'm going to dedicate myself to the same way I dedicated myself to completing these games. I just don't think it's going to be as interesting, because I've already played through these games. It's just going to be some minor tweaks, just here and there, nothing really to replay the game for. Maybe I've just had my fun. But something unique to this console that will probably be fun for many is the game chat feature. I think this is useless? Maybe? Basically, this is exactly what it sounds like. It adds voice chat to games. You can also use your camera as well. Or not necessarily your camera. The camera that Nintendo specifically designed to work with this console. And overall, I can't really say I'm very pleased with this. Not only did the camera quality look awful in the videos that I've seen, but it just generally feels pointless to do this unless you want like exclusive control over it. Because something that could also be done is you could easily just connect Discord to Nintendo Switch. I think that would be extremely great because a lot of people do use Discord. And the ability to not be limited by people who are using the console, because this is a console-only feature. You need a console to do this. I think it would just generally be more convenient for people to be able to talk from literally whatever device, like PC, mobile. I think that would just be extremely convenient. But I can also see why Nintendo would choose to make something like this, because obviously Nintendo does not own Discord in any way. So they're basically at the mercy of Discord when it comes to their voice chat service. Anyways, pretty much game chat is kind of just run-of-the-mill in terms of voice chat. You can share your screen, which I'd imagine isn't also going to be very high quality, because that also requires a lot of processing power. And I'm going to imagine there's going to be some games, unless this is executed absolutely perfectly, there's going to be some games that are going to lag like crazy when you're like streaming your game or whatever, or even just talking to others, because that's going to require additional processing power. So there's going to have to be a limit in place for processing power for the game, so that way there's still a little bit of processing power left over for game chat, because those are two things that need to run simultaneously. However, I don't really have much to say here, literally because I have seen game chat in many places. It's kind of just copy and pasted. But talking more about the camera can be used in games as well. I do know that the new version of Mario Party Jamboree will be utilizing that in some mini games. And I think that's kind of just weird, because what it does is sort of, I guess, puts you in the game. The Wii U does this specifically with Nintendo Land. I hated it. I found it extremely distracting to see my own face in the game. It's definitely a unique approach though, but I most definitely cannot see myself using this feature. Not really just because I'm so mad and shaking my fist about the quality, which I would sincerely hope goes up. I know this video has to be like streamed across the internet and stuff, which may or may not be good depending on the connection, but still it just looks so pixelated and it really just sticks out like a sore thumb for such a console that's this new and that's capable of so many things that we just talked about. And I also just kind of feel that having the actual player in the form of like just camera footage, that's the best term I can really come up with here. I feel like that's just going to replace, you know, playing as an actual Mario character, or in other cases, designing like a Mii character and stuff. I think it's just not going to make a whole lot of sense. It's going to feel like the Minecraft movie in many ways, which I am yet to see, by the way. But I'd be very interested to see just how this goes right here. Probably more than anything else in this video, actually, except for what we're going to talk about next, and that is the outrageous pricing on some of these games, and how there are no physical games anymore, which is extremely upsetting to me, because I like the idea of purchasing the game and owning it forever. I think it's very scummy of Nintendo to just require you to download these games off the internet, which, by the way, isn't going to be up forever. Once they announce their next console and they shut down the servers for the current console right now, the Switch 2, like they've done with the Wii U, you're not going to be able to get these games anymore. And it's going to suck. It's going to suck big time. Because let's say you purchased the game in the past and you want to download it again, that's not going to work. But the pricing on these games is also absurd. I've heard that some of these games can cost up to $80, which is mind-bogglingly expensive. Can you imagine being a kid and asking your parents to purchase you a game that's $80? That's actually insane. I know these games are extremely high quality, and they're specifically designed to run on this specific device, which is why you can't get them, at least legally, anywhere else. But $80 is absolutely outrageous. So who knows, that price might actually go down, because I'm more than confident that there's going to be a whole bunch of people that don't want to buy the Switch 2 purely because of these prices and the whole internet thing I talked about before. So essentially, you pay $80 to play the game, and once the servers go down, you have the game until you lose that game, and you don't have a second chance at getting it again like you have with other games. The closest thing Nintendo has to a physical copy is a little cartridge similar to the game cards for the Switch, but instead of containing the actual game data and the assets and everything, it's just a code to download the game off the internet. And I find that really upsetting, because these often cost more than downloading them off the internet, like straight from the console. I would sincerely hope that there is a physical form of these games, because people are going to pirate these left and right once the servers are down, and there will basically be no legal way to distribute these anymore. So I would sincerely hope that Nintendo has a plan for the future, but if we're being real here, they're probably just going to just erase their history, or at least make an attempt at erasing their history like they have many, many times in the past. But anyways, yeah, that's all I've really got to say. If you like what you heard, like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you in the next one. There's definitely been a lot to talk about lately. I'll probably get some other commentary videos out soon, maybe. Next few months or so, I'm not really sure. But yeah, that's all I've really got to say.